Everyone, how's it going? My name is richardlmoglen, and welcome back to a stock market outlook video sponsored by MarketSmith. And last week was definitely an interesting one. I talked about the potential for a very quick short covering rally, and that's pretty much what we got, a really strong push into the 21 EMA. But then on this Thursday, we had a gap down and go finishing right at the lows, and we do have this kind of unfilled gap here. So if we're able to push into that next week, I think that would be constructive. But if this stays unfilled and we kind of chop around and then confirm to the downside, we could be in for a retest of these lows or these ones right here. But so far we're holding that 14,000 level, and we did see some constructive action, although it was on lower volume today. So keep an open mind, be flexible, be ready for any scenario, and have a list of longs as well as potential ideas to short if that's your strategy. So in this video, we'll run through the indexes, leading names, then we'll talk about sentiment from a few different sources, the IBD Big Picture article, and finally the Wishing Well GMI signal. And if you do enjoy my analysis, please go ahead and take the time right now and leave me a like down below. It really helps me out and my channel. And of course, subscribe if you are new and want to see more videos just like this one every single week. So getting into it a little bit more in depth, I like how we're holding this higher low potentially. I'd love to see maybe an inside day and then a reconfirmation of the upside filling that gap. But as of right now, we are still below a declining 21 EMA, below declining 50 SMA, and below the 200-day as well on the NASDAQ composite. And next week, I'd love to see us kind of build out sideways and then push through a declining 21 EMA, get back above that moving average and kind of let that curl up under price. I think that'd be very constructive. And at that point, a lot of leaders will be building out the right-hand sides and breaking out of sound bases. And that's really the optimal environment right there for breakout traders. And I'd love to see us see a trend like this one after a fall through day. So that's pretty much it for the NASDAQ composite. Moving on over to the S&P 500. This has a very similar look. We had a nice push up here, but then the gap down and finish at the lows, and then a constructive day today, although on lower volumes. So very similar action. I love to see us get back above that 21 EMA and start to build above it. And I love to see us get back above that 50 SMA as well. And just in general, be ready for whatever happens next week, whether we kind of build out here and push up or push the downside, break that 200-day once again. That can happen, so keep an open mind. And as I said, have a list ready of potential leaders that you're looking to build into if we do progress further. And we'll go through a few ideas later on in this video. Moving on to a few more indexes, I like to take a look at the IWO, the Russell 2000 Growth Index. This is still in a downtrend below a declining 21 and 50 SMA, so we're not yet in that easy dollar environment. Once again, I'd love to see us break above that moving average, build above it, and start a new uptrend forming these higher lows. Looking at the IWM in general, you can see we're still below a declining 21 and 50 SMA, so once again, not the optimal environment. And lastly, taking a look at the FFTY, we're once again below a declining 21, 50 SMA, and 200 days. So the trend is really down at this point when it comes to these indexes, and I'd love to see us also get back above this prior base low. So all these indexes have a lot of work to do before they can start new uptrends in earnest, but we'll have to just kind of wait and see if they can build up the right-hand side and also be on the lookout for growth leaders that are bottoming before the indexes. So with that said, let's move on over to some growth leaders, and let's start with Snapchat. Looking at this chart, you can see we're in a downtrend, but we did have a large gap up today on earnings, decent close as well. And what's kind of strange, and you can't even see it on this chart because this is hiding it, is it had a 20% plus gap down the day before. So some pretty strange and volatile action, but this is one to watch, and you had really large volume on this gap up. So maybe you can start a little bit of a character change and move up the right-hand side of its base. Bill.com, another earnings mover to watch here. Good closing range, large volume as well, though not quite as relatively huge as Snapchat, but definitely one to have on your radar. Back above a declining 50 and a rising 200-day as well. And you're kind of breaking this channel with this gap up day. So I want to watch to see if you can kind of build sideways and then push off, and then you can manage risk right at that higher low. Next up, let's talk about Facebook, which had a gap down, upside reversal today, but still no touch from me. You're below a lot of overhead supply here, and maybe it builds out, but this just isn't my type of a trade. And we'll have to see whether it can break above this high and get back above 250. But right now, this is really not on my radar. Huge volume to the downside as well. And you can see decelerating earnings, sales, and also margins, which isn't a good sign. And you've also got estimate revisions to the downside. So a lot's going against it as of this point, and it's also not in a leading group. Moving on, let's also take a look at a few other of the mega caps. Apple holding up pretty well, decent reaction to earnings, back above a rising 50 and 21 EMA. This looks pretty good right through this pivot. Netflix, however, is still suffering from this gap down. We had a push up into the declining 21 EMA area, and then a reaction to the downside, although it is holding near 400. But once again, it's still in a downtrend, and it really has to prove itself and start to build up the right-hand side. Also taking a look at Nvidia. This is kind of representative of the semiconductor space. We had a bounce off the 200-day moving average. Now it's pushed into the 21 EMA and has rebounded down. So maybe it kind of builds and then pushes up through this pivot, or maybe we have another retest of the 200-day. We just have to wait and see what happens. AMD as well reported earnings. Not the greatest reaction, not the greatest closing range, but it is holding up right near the 21 EMA. So maybe it can start to build towards that 50 SMA and maybe form some higher lows and make its way up the right-hand side of this base. We've got a DTL forming right at this level. Also taking a look at Qualcomm, I like to check in with this name. This is a little bit stronger than AMD and Nvidia. It's closer to the top of its prior base, although definitely showing a lot of volatile action, but it was very powerful off the bottom and also reported earnings on this day. So overall, just at the 50 SMA and above a rising 21 EMA as of this moment. Another growth name I'm watching very closely and I've got a position in is Bros, and I actually made an entire video about this name, so go ahead and check that out. It should be linked down below in the description and popping up right now. And I talked through the chart, the edges I used, and what I'm watching for next, which is a breakout through this 60 level. So that is Bros. Definitely go ahead and check out that video after this one. Also, let's take a look at Tesla, of course. You can see it's forming out a little bit of a pivot right here. Good respect for the 200-day moving average, and now I like how it's going quiet and tight on declining volume. So definitely want to watch next week for a swing trade or a position trade, and we'll have to see whether it can pop back through the 21 EMA and make a move back towards 1,000. Lastly, let's take a look at ExxonMobil, which has been super powerful from this stage 1B breakout. Definitely extended at this point, and we've got a little bit of a fade here after a gap up. So definitely extended, no touch for me. But a lot of these kind of oil and gas names, coal names, AMR is one that I've traded, and just in general, a lot of the XLE names are acting pretty well and making new highs during this correction. So definitely keep an eye out on these. A lot of them are short-term extended, so maybe they need to form out new buy points. MTDR, I think, tried to break out and pull back in today, so maybe look for in the wick action and breakout through this stage 3 cup pivot. So with that, let's go on over to TC2000 and run through a bunch more charts of potential leaders. So sorting by that weekly change, Bill, obviously nice push here on good volume. We already talked about that. Snap as well, we covered. Bros, we covered as well. AMR making new price and relative strength new highs. AA, the same thing, nice action from this base and really nice trend over the course of the past almost year or so. Tech also acting well, holding that 21 EMA and back above a rising 10. ExxonMobil short-term extended, but good action as well. And we'll have to see whether this can form another kind of base or short-term shelf against the 21 EMA. MUR, another oil and gas name, acting pretty well, although you can see the pullback here intraday. Oxy as well, OAS, a lot of these look pretty similar. Qualcomm, we already talked about. Good kind of pinch here against all the moving averages, and we'll have to see whether it can kind of push up here and make its way towards all-time highs. Arch, a little bit of a fade yesterday and kind of upside reversal, but not a great closing range day on this bar. Google, also another one that reported earnings, not a great reaction, but is holding that 50 SMA. CF, another one making new price and relative strength new highs. Zim also acting well. A lot of shippers are acting well. Tesla, we covered already. XLE, just trending beautifully. VSCO, another recent IPO to keep on your radar as it kind of forms against this pivot near 58. COP trending nicely. FANG, another name to have on your radar. MTDR, DVN, very similar action. CDEV also with a fade today. PLAB, I like how this is forming up the right hand side and finding nice support against the 50-day moving average. Netflix we covered already, holding that 400 level for now. Visa, nice upside reversal action against the 200-day moving average. Maybe watch for a quick swing trade through this prior high. Apple acting well, building a little bit of a launching pad here up the right-hand side. Venom, nice action as well. MasterCard, similar to Visa. MDRX also acting well, upside reversal against the 10-day moving average, and I actually tried this, got stopped out, pretty much break even right here, but I'll be watching this through this high next week. VRTX also making a nice push up the right hand side of this pretty large base here, and you've got potential resistance right at that level. You can see we found resistance right there, but maybe as it builds out another short-term base, you could buy it through this high. REGN also building nicely right against the moving averages. SLGN upside reversal today, but acting pretty well. Very choppy this one, so hard to trade. LMT forming a nice pivot here against a 10-day SMA. Limelight Networks acting nicely, good upside reversal and oops reversal today on this Friday. Newer building out a base right under the moving averages. Maybe this is a little bit too tight for too long, and actually tried this and got stopped out for a small loss on this day from the inside day and up setup. GSL pulling back into the 10-day moving average, looks pretty good. And finally, SG, just an IPO to have on your radar. It is below the key moving averages, but forming a nice pivot right near 33. So that's a quick run through of some names that are on my focus list pretty much, or in my universe here, that are showing decent relative strength. And let me know any names that I missed down below in the comments section. And now looking at a few different sources of sentiment, let's start with my Twitter surveys. We saw a decrease from 45.6 to 36.1. So that is pretty significant. And also looking at the name exposure index, we saw a subtle increase from 53 to 62, nothing too dramatic. So I would love to see this actually decrease and undercut 50. That would be optimal. Maybe we get one more shakeout, but we'll have to see what happens. And now looking at the bulls versus bears poll, you can see we are declining here, but we didn't quite get that cross that we saw back in March of 2020. And also taking a look at the pull-call ratio, we're still pretty elevated, but haven't seen that spike yet to 1.15. With that said, let's move on over to the IBD Big Picture article. The headline is Tech Stocks Lead Stock Market Despite Big Jump in 10-Year Yield, Amazon Surges on Cloud Growth. Reading through to discuss the action on this past Friday, how the December and November job growth was revised sharply higher, as well as discussing the jump in the 10-year yield, and despite that, the strong action in the indexes. They also mentioned a few other names here: DDOG, FTNT, PanW, and also some financial stocks which were showing some relative strength. So overall, they're still in a current outlook of a confirmed uptrend, and we've got some leaders up in volume and some down in volume as well. Lastly, we've got the Wishing Wealth GMI signal, which is still red since January 10th of 2022. And you can see that on this past Thursday, the GMI score was still only a 1 out of 6. So overall, my current outlook isn't quite as strong as IBD's. I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, but we'll have to see how things develop and if more growth setups really start to emerge and break out of sound basis. So that's really what I'm looking for. But I think if you want to try your hand at a few setups forming at a proper basis, you absolutely can do that, but practice progressive exposure, manage risk along the way. And with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please go ahead and leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you guys in future videos. Thanks.